Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Founder Files. Today, I'm talking to Greg Blend and Grant Friedman from Africrest Properties. Africrest is a business that essentially turns office buildings into residential properties that are resort-style living and rental living for people between the age of 22 and 35. In the years since they've been building the business, they've grown it to over 3 billion rand in assets under management. They're a company of over 150 people now. So this is a story of proper scaling. And I also love the fact that we're getting into this because this is true bricks and mortar, quite literally. So in this episode, we start off by talking how they actually started a property business with no properties and no cash to begin with. We then get into the point of how they merged with Africrest because Africrest wasn't the original name and what that was able to unlock for their scale moving forward. We then speak about how this opportunity to actually unlock growth by converting offices into residential properties actually came later and was the birth of what their business is now, and how that opportunity existed in the first place and how they were ready for it and tackled it. We also get into how they're able to source feedback and innovation from their tenants and customers at scale and ensure that what they're implementing and what they're doing within their property is actually decided on and voted on by their tenants. We also talk about how they're able to deliver a consistent customer or tenant experience across the board, making sure that they're living this ethos and passion of what they care about as the founders and making sure everyone in the company is doing it as well. On top of that, they're talking about how they were able to build out the systems through rapid expansion, especially after COVID, when they were able to unlock their growth, and how they managed to scale the people and the team throughout this business to ensure that they would continue thriving moving forward. And obviously, besides all that, way more in between within the details. There's so much practical wisdom and insights from these guys. They built an amazing business, and this is definitely a story you want to hear. Now, if you want to make sure you don't miss any other great stories from founders like these, make sure that you're following us on all of our preferred podcast platforms and social media so you don't miss another episode like this. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Greg and Grant. Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Grant, Greg, welcome to the Founder Files, guys. I'm coming from a family of people that are in construction, in property development, in asset management. I can't believe it's taken this long for me to interview someone who's in the same line of business. So welcome to the Founder Files, and I can't wait to get into some topics around real, tangible, quite literally bricks and mortar kind of businesses. So yeah, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks for having us, Cameron.
Thanks, Cameron.
So guys, I start this off every single time the same way, just so everyone can understand a bit about the business. Explain to me the Africrest business and business model.
So Africrest Properties is a multi-family housing residential developer. In simple terms, we build large residential estates in Johannesburg, between 300 and 500 apartments that we own and manage. So we don't sell apartments off. We create estates mainly for young South Africans between the ages of 22 and 35, with a focus on affordability, excellent locations, so very close to business districts, and incredible amenities that we call them hotel style or resort style amenities, but a really nice living experience for our tenants.
I think what's important to note is our buildings are owned by one landlord instead of having a sectional title complex. We call it multi-family housing. So there are many benefits for the tenants to live in a building that has a single landlord. For example, maintenance is done super quick. You don't have to wait for a body corporate to decide, and they're bickering between themselves of what color should we paint this wall, which contractor should we use my cousin for it, I want a pink wall, etc. We can also deal with noise complaints and rules violations easily and quickly because you don't have your neighbor's landlord who only cares about collecting their rental and doesn't really want to evict their tenants, whereas we would rather lose one tenant to keep the whole building happy. And, things like that we can get into more detail, but there's so many advantages to the tenant having a professional landlord who's got control of the full environment, creating a community for the tenants. And as Grant said, we've got amazing amenities in our estates. So the tenant essentially gets a very affordable apartment in an amazing location, close to workplaces, with top-notch security, with access to swimming pools and business centers, state-of-the-art gyms. We don't just build in a gym like you usually see, like in a 4-star hotel with a treadmill and some weights. It's a gym where you can cancel a Virgin Active membership, and there'll be a personal trainer there giving free group classes, and it's beautiful with proper equipment, proper business centers like WeWork style, where you can work from home with private Zoom pods and boardrooms and that sort of thing. So we call it resort style living. That's essentially our model of multifamily housing.
Yeah. So today, we have 8 estates that we've developed in Johannesburg, made up of about 4,000 apartments. Our largest estate is 680 apartments, and our smallest estate is 250.
So cool, guys. You've given me the context of the business. I love this. I mean, it's obviously quite compelling to me. You're making me question the fact that I'm a property and a house owner myself in Claremont in Cape Town. I'm like, the amount of effort it goes into maintenance for this thing, maybe I should actually live in one of your resort style living instead, because that sounds like a great package. But yeah, so you said that you've got 8 estates in Joburg. I mean, we're going to get into how the business started and how you got there in the first place, but just a bit more context around where the business is at now. So you said just in Johannesburg, 8 estates. I mean, there's the properties that you develop and you manage yourselves. Like, is that how the business is currently structured? So give me more detail just to understand the kind of size and scale that you've got the business to now.
So Africrest today, while we own these 8 large estates and we're growing our estate portfolio, there's historical legacy assets within the portfolio, and we'll get into the story about how we own shopping centers and office buildings, etc. But the business today roughly is about 3.3 billion rand of assets. We have 150 staff. I'd say 90% or 85% of our assets are our large residential estates, with the balance just being our legacy assets that we are slowly winding out of to focus on these estates and developing them out.
Okay, so I mean, just to be clear, I know if anyone wants to obviously Google Africrest, they're going to see Africrest commercial. There's obviously Africrest residential. Talk to me now. It's like we're just talking about the residential play here. What about the commercial side of the business?
So historically, the company was mostly commercial. Commercial properties in general, with COVID, and Johannesburg properties in particular, pre-COVID, have gone through a really terrible time. People working from home, a huge oversupply of offices in Johannesburg resulted in large vacancies, large rental reversions. So there wasn't much growth in that aspect of the sector, and property values have decreased a fortune, which 2 of our other 2 partners in the business were focused on commercial. We were focused on residential, and they saw where commercial was heading and how well we were doing on the residential side, which we'll get into the merger a bit later. But essentially, we still own a bunch of those commercial buildings. We are slowly selling out of them, but the decline in the commercial sector has actually unlocked the residential sector for us, because the majority of our developments are office to apartment conversions. So we're able to buy offices for pretty cheap, which is the key to our success.
Nice. I'm keen to get a bit deeper into that secret sauce, because I mean that's typical entrepreneurial spirits, to be able to spot an opportunity where the market's in a downturn, how you're going to turn this to your advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
So guys, now talk to me around, like, how did you get this started, right? What was the beginning stage of the business? I mean, you didn't just suddenly wake up and have 3.3 billion rand in assets under management, right? So tell me about the beginning story of Grant and Greg.
So Grant and I were friends in university. We used to go to gym together, and at gym we would talk about different business ideas, and we had this idea that we over time that we wanted to own a business and not have a job. And in my honors year, Grant had a job working at a small accounting firm, and he has started a few businesses on the side, Bluetooth car kits, and I was studying, and Grant, I know you can discuss your property, the first property that came up, and Funzisa from there.
Okay. So the first business Greg and I together was a student recruitment business. We saw an opportunity to bring students in from India, Sri Lanka, those kind of regions who wanted to study overseas but couldn't get into top grade universities. Will come to South Africa, which is maybe on the B grade side, but it's still international studying. We put a lot of time into that business, and ultimately we failed due to the Department of Home Affairs not wanting to issue visas to these students. Thank goodness we got into property. But the byproduct of that business was that we needed to house these students. And part of that was having to find apartments and residential homes for all these students. So we started lining up a block of flats that I had an interest in. And I think from that, we started having this more love for property. So as our student recruitment business was failing and doing terribly, this property love, may have always been there, but it started to crystallize a bit.
So essentially at that point, Grant was forced to go sit at that block of flats and manage them and fill them up. At that point, it was maybe a year and a half into it, I'd finished studying, and I said, okay, I actually need to get a job. But with the intention that Grant and I were going to do another deal. And Grant would come fetch me during my job in my lunch hour or whenever, and we'll go see properties and we'll go do deals. And I was never too engaged with the job because next month we're going to get this deal that we're working on, and I was always resigning next month. And this went on for 2 years with countless deals. Grant and I, like when we started, we really didn't know anything. We were so naive, and I think we didn't know what a rand per square meter was. Someone asked what we're paying per square meter, and it was actually embarrassing. But we learned as we went, and we did like full due diligences on buildings, and we weren't exactly sure how we were going to pay for these buildings, but we were hustling around town and meeting people and networking. Eventually, 2 years into this, resigning next month, I said, okay, I need to actually get a job where I'm more engaged. This thing doesn't seem like it's working, but we'll still keep trying. And 3 months into that new job, I was in the private equity space. We finally did our first deal. It was a small light industrial / commercial building in Wynberg. We partnered with two businessmen who helped, put in a disproportionate amount of capital in, and we could use the balance sheets, and we managed to buy the small building, which we still own today. And then I decided let me resign. It was quite a tough decision because it was, we had the 2 properties ready, and I didn't need to be full-time at all. But from that point of resigning, it kind of snowballed, and we just did deal after deal from there. So
I can jump in here. Sorry, Cameron. The one thing is that, so we put our capital, all our savings into the small assets, and we had no money left. There was no more capital left from Greg and I. So at that point, we needed to raise money. We learned very quickly that capital talks in property. You can try to do the best deals in the market and be as aggressive as you want, but if you don't have the money to back it up, you really have nothing. And we spent some time meeting various high net worth individuals, private equity companies, and we're very fortunate that at that stage when we had bought our first building, a private equity company, Buffett Investments, they liked us a lot. We liked them a lot. There was a great synergies. And they basically said, "We'll back you guys. Let's grow something together."
Yeah, because this is also what I was just trying to wrap my head around, is about the fact that it's like you're going there trying to make deals around property. I'm like, how do you do this when you don't have the cash to do this as well? Like, I mean, that's you. The beginning stages, you're trying to start a property company with no properties and no cash. Like, how does that work?
I think we were like, 22 years old or so. We were naive, and we just assumed that with the right deal, like, why wouldn't someone want to invest with us? And, that's the coolest thing ever, owning a property. Like, and as I said, in that time, we had that like 2-year period to meet people, and we presented different investors with different deals and, built relationships. So by the time we were ready to strike with, deals that we actually wanted to execute and that the bank would provide debt on, we were very fortunate that Buffett were amazing partners and were keen to back us as young, relatively inexperienced or very inexperienced entrepreneurs.
Everyone listening to this will get that.
Yeah, I think what's important as well is we've always believed, and I've believed this since the very beginning, and it hasn't changed today, our attitude towards some transactions that we look at today. If the deal's right, the money will be there. It's as simple as that. And we've always done good deals. Yeah, there's been one or two scary ones and mistakes, but ultimately, if the deal's good, the capital will always be available.
So, excuse my own ignorance in this space, but like when you're talking about the deal being good and then the money will be there, like what's the deal? Because from my perspective, looking at this, it's like, okay, well, it's a simple transaction about the fact that I'm purchasing property, and then what I'm going to do with that property is up to you. It's like because you own it now. So the deal is just, in my mind, that transaction. So when you're talking about making a good deal, the capital will be there. What do you mean by the deal?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's important to understand that property is a big basket that everyone attributes in real estate. But what we do is very different to a growth point or a listed fund where they buy properties that are income generative in order to distribute funds to shareholders. We are value add investors. And what that means is we'll buy a property and we have to do something unique or special to it to change it. We've never bought a property and left it as it is. That's not our game. We need to redevelop, redesign, knock down, rebuild, kick everyone out, change it completely. In the United States, it's called value add investing, but we need to change the asset. And when we say a deal's good, is we saying, well, the property we're buying today is X. We're going to spend a year of our time and energy and experience and change this thing up, and at the end, it's going to be worth Y, and that's the deal. You're buying for the Y. You're buying for that value add.
That makes more sense. 100%. So that anyone who's going to back that investment is essentially because it's like what I'm displaying to you is I'm not essentially holding onto a property and hoping that that's going to appreciate in value. Is the fact that I'm going to control directly the appreciation of this value because of the inputs and the value add that I'm going to be able to bring to this. So in terms of that, any kind of the cash needed to outlay this kind of just, it's just does the deal make sense, and is there logic to it, and can I also trust you to execute this?
Remember, in Johannesburg, since we've been involved in property, there hasn't been capital appreciation for the most part. I think most people know just the house that they own in the last 10 years or so has been probably, in real terms, depreciation. So, it's kind of frustrating for us when we meet guys living in Australia and the US and that, and that's just bought a property, they hold on to it for 3 years and they sold it for a fortune more. We've never experienced something like that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even in Cape Town is like that boom hit really hard, but is completely stabilized now. So the kind of rush to be able to buy a residential property in Cape Town and say in a couple of years it's going to appreciate, you're going to upgrade, is like that. Those days have passed now. Now the kind of entry barrier to actually just get into the property space, I guess anywhere in the world. I mean, the number of everyone listening to this, you all know the memes around millennials trying to buy property, and now we're sitting with two millennials to try to buy property. So actually, hopefully, we're going to get some hacks here to figure out like what we can do and change this story of generational wealth problems. Okay, but guys,
well, Cameron, can I just respond to what you just said there? And it's such an interesting thing. A lot of young people today, millennials, guys between the ages of 20 and 28, they all just want to get on the property train. They want to buy an apartment and rent it out. And the fundamentally, unless you're in an economy that's really growing and you're having, great property inflation, not general inflation, the truth is it's actually a trap. And what we're doing is we probably, in the German market, in the UK market, in the Irish market, Italian market, there's more renters than buyers. Because young people don't buy property because there's better ways to invest your money. There's more liquid ways. There's better ways to actually, to make money. And when we're appealing to our tenants, they've realized that. They say, wait a minute, why would I go spend 1.3 million rand or 1.2 million rand on an apartment? And I have no control of my levies. Our rates and taxes are growing at an overinflation rate. If I leave this apartment, there's huge transaction costs in, huge transaction costs out. And if I do leave and I want to rent it out, I'm now a landlord. I don't know how to be a landlord. I don't have a lease agreement. I'm going to get a terrible return. Why? You can put your money in South African bonds and get 10% today. Why would you buy a sectional title block of flat, an apartment, and have all that risk without any of the upside? And that's where our tenants, and that's where we've been fortunate to, rent out thousands of apartments a year, because our tenants are saying, wait a minute, we don't want to buy these things. You guys buy them. You're the professional landlord. You don't wake up in the afternoon and say, I just want to make a burger. It'll cost you, you have to buy the whole lettuce. You have to buy the 6-pack of rolls. Just go to McDonald's. That's what they do. That's their business.
we always tell our tenants when they ask us if they say they're thinking about buying a house, we always say your rent is the most you'll ever pay and your bonds is the least you'll ever pay.
Unpack that for me.
Well, your rent, you know what it is, and you're going to have to pay your electricity and water on top
Oh,
of that.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Now I get. So the like your ceiling is kind of the rent in terms of. Yeah. I get you now. Yeah. 100%. As somebody who's got a house.
But most people don't think
guys.
about all those other. Never mind the transaction costs of getting in and out of a property. All those other costs of owning a property. They don't factor that into account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%. Anyway, so besides all those switching costs and challenges and why rental's the game, which you selling me on here convincingly, which goes to show why you've got your business to where it is. But let's unpack that as well. So I mean, okay, so you've started this now. You managed to get some private equity backing. You said from Buffett Investments. I'm obviously assuming same thing with the audience. That's not Warren Buffett. That's a different company we're talking about. Or if it's not, that's Epic. And so you kind of unlocked that. What were those first properties that you managed to get? What did you do with them?
The first one was a property in Bramley. It used to be a retirement village. It was a big piece of land, 3 hectares, about 1.5 kilometers from Murray's Arch, for context. So a great location, but it was a rundown property that was housing a bunch of 300 or so students on NSFAS funding. We thought when we bought it, our intention was to kind of run it like that, and to students' accommodation, which I think is important to note. Our properties now are not students' accommodation. That's a separate business entirely. A lot of people think we do students' accommodation, but it's not. So
sorry, on that, I guess it's like, again, because these are the nuances of the business that I kind of want to get into. It's like you're saying it's not student accommodation. For me, again, is like being a landlord's being a landlord, right? I'm renting out this property to X person or to Y person, just depending on that. And there's a certain risk profile that they'll have. They'll have certain behaviors accordingly, and they've got certain needs that they need around their property, sure. But like whether it's a lower rental for a student or like a moderate rental for a young professional, but why are those two different businesses?
A student business is a completely different business to what we do. There's commonalities in terms of where you generate rent and you have expenses, but it's more of a business of managing individuals and managing tenants. If you have a block of 100 apartments, you can usually have 300 students living there, or maybe 100 non-students. And obviously you think in your head when you're a student how you behaved and the noise you made and the chaos you created and the fights you had and the boyfriends and girlfriends throwing things at each other. It's a different business. And I would imagine similar to a nursery school and a university, different behaviors, different things to worry about, and just different. It's just different. And we are so specific in our rental market that we're only renting to 22 to 32-year-olds. Yes, maybe someone 21 or 35, but our tenants, and we've become hyper focused on this bracket of the market.
You're adults. Like you're selling to adults. They're young adults, but you're adults.
Most of our tenants are working in a large corporate or for government. Our average rentals I think it's quite important to say, is about 7,000 Rand, ranging from 5,000 Rand to 9,000 Rand. Majority of our apartments are studios or bachelors and 1 beds. So the average apartment would be a 32 square meter 1 bed for around just under 7,000 Rand, including free fiber, which obviously saves them a lot of money, and all the amenities.
Yeah, so our tenants aren't married yet. They most likely entering into some serious relationships in their life, and they will leave us. They will leave us to buy maybe a ballroom type apartment where they need a bit more space because they're getting married, or they want to have a child. But that's not for us. We don't target that type of market. We're targeting those tenants in their life that want flexibility, i.e., they can move between properties if need be. They want amenities. And they're more focused on location and affordability than maybe someone with a child who needs a bit more space and is home a lot more. Our tenants probably aren't home as much as any other asset class.
Okay. So thank you. Now I feel like I've got a better understanding of the business within 20 minutes, right? So now I feel like I'm an expert on what you guys do. You can step aside. I'll take over. Joking, obviously. Please don't. So now, going back to the story now, you've got this student accommodation that was this retirement village. Talk to me about how you started unlocking that. I mean, this is now the beginning of the story where things kind of start ramping up. So I think without getting into too much detail, it's like, what did that start unlock, and what was the momentum that started generating from there?
Well, it turned out to be a bit of a disaster. They were all NSFAS funded, and essentially NSFAS said, sorry, we're not paying, these guys don't qualify, although they had already stayed there for several months. And we just never got paid. Now, we were stuck with this bond. It was a 30 million rand property or something. We had a huge bond on it, and we had to kick all these students out. And what do we do with this? So we started filling it up with regular people, and we identified, this is an amazing piece of land. The Rio Valle was coming nearby on the Wiburta, and there was talks about, densification along it. And Grant and I said, instead of just trying to put lipstick on a pig, let's do something great here. And we got some architects involved, and we came up with this whole scheme to build hundreds of apartments there, essentially flatten it and build hundreds of apartments. And we somehow got an appointment to present to the city of Johannesburg to present our idea, because we needed to increase the density and the zoning of this property to allow for such a big development. And we basically made a pitch to the city of Johannesburg, and they loved it. And we then had to convince our funding partners and banks and all of that. And every developer we spoke to said, you guys are out of your minds. You're in your early 20s. You've never laid a brick before. You can't go build a 450 apartment development. You're going to lose a lot of money. Like you will make mistakes in your first few developments. Start off, do 2 or 3 apartments. Luckily, we never listened.
As any good entrepreneur will attest to.
I think the experience share there is that we were naive in terms of our ability, but we were also very acutely aware of the fact that we didn't know how to develop. And what we did, which I think was really impactful, was we tried to surround ourselves with the best people. We weren't shy or embarrassed to phone. We phoned Octodec, which is the largest. They're a publicly listed company that are probably the largest residential landlord in the country. And we phoned them, and we spoke to their asset manager. We said, "Can you recommend an architect? Can you recommend an engineer?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. This is who we use." And we weren't scared to go out there and really say, "We don't know anything." But developers are about hiring great people. And we surrounded ourselves by really experienced individuals who, the one project manager, a guy, Anton Hartman, who he still does our developments today. That's from the first to today. We've built probably 2 billion rands of the assets together. But we surrounded ourselves by really great people with great referrals, as opposed to being, well, we're naive, we can build. We knew we couldn't build, and we wanted to build. And we were exceptionally hands-on. We sat in every development site meeting. When an architect said, let's do this, we asked why. And I think for a lot of the listeners out there, they need to know that while you may not be an engineer, sit with your engineer and understand what he's talking about and question him. And if you don't get the warm and fuzzy from him, hire another engineer, get a second opinion. Don't be scared to ask many questions and get many third options. People sometimes want to sit back and say, okay, well, we're not the expert. Well, you guys must just do it. You can't just let professionals develop for you.
And I think the other side of that is that, I think you acknowledged that you didn't have the knowledge to be able to build the business. But I think the life cycle stage and the age that you were at means that you're also in quite a perfect position to really have true empathy and understanding for who the customers would be. So you're able to bring this understanding intuitively around what it is that was actually needed in order to be developed and what the opportunity was. But in order to execute on that, that you needed the help in order to be able to do so, which I think is a great place to acknowledge and point out, because you can get the other way around of potentially understanding how to build a business, but if you don't know the market, you're never going to succeed.
Yeah, and we never knew the markets. The market, we knew that there was rental apartments to build, and we built our 450 apartments, and it's probably one of our worst developments because it was our first, even though it's fully let today and it's been fully let for years, or 95, 98% let. But what we've always done is always developed for our tenants and not for ourselves. It's not what we want. every decision we make, from the name of the buildings to how big the gyms are to what kind of curtain rail we use, it's tenant driven. We continuously asking our tenants, what do you guys want? I don't live here. What is it that you guys want? And we've that's been a huge driver of ours. We have tenant surveys where we give a lot of money to tenants to try get the answers out of them. And every decision we make is for the tenant. It really isn't about ourselves. And our tenants now love living there, and it becomes a bit of a wheel of things get better and better. Tenants enjoy it more, and soon tenants are complaining about things that actually really are so small and minute, but the product is getting so good.
Yeah, so that's that. I definitely thank you. I really want to go deeper into this now because no matter what business you have, actually getting proper feedback from your customers or prospective customers is critical. But the point is, it's emphasizing good feedback and bad feedback as well. And especially if you're in the B2C space and you're selling directly to customers, getting them to actually fill out surveys and give you feedback is also quite hard. So can we actually just spend a couple minutes and just unpacking to me is what is that you guys have learned, and what have you done in the past, and made what are the mistakes that you made around trying to get useful feedback from your tenants, and what are the systems that you built to be able to do that well now?
I think the best feedback we get is when we offer some sort of incentive to fill out the form, because we've got 4,000 tenants now. As much as we talk to the tenants when we're on site, and our staff talk to the tenants and give us feedback, to get 2,500 people of the 4,000 voting on which type of curtain rail they prefer, that gives you a real sample. So for something like that, we'll give I think we did a 20,000 rand or 30,000 rand cash prize for. We say, give us your best idea, whatever you want, from how we market our buildings, from your process of signing up with us, to your moving process, to your living process, to your common areas, whatever you want, give us your best idea. And the best idea is going to get 20,000 rand cash, second best, 15,000 rand cash. So that's, that's a bigger prize than most people think's necessary, but 20 grand to get an idea that we implement in a business of this size, it's for free, So I think it's about going big on that prize to get people actually engaged with thinking, what's something that I can improve about this business? And we've got some really valuable insight from that. But otherwise, it's people's homes, it's their everyday. So we, if you position the messaging right in the body of the email for the survey, guys, we really want to improve your living experience with regards to this. Please take 2 minutes. And, we can really help. We can make you happier, essentially. And we actually, even sometimes without a prize, and we get good feedback.
This makes me think of so many different founders out there listening to this, because it's the fact of the matter is in terms of building out features or part of the product or improving value for customers. I think if I can make it that abstract, but that's the point at the end of the day, is how can I make sure that we're adding as much value to our customers as possible? The fact is, it's we shouldn't be trusting our own assumptions and judgments because we aren't the customer. And I think to do that and get the source out from them in order to inform it, and I just love the model of what you're doing, because I think the point of having some kind of majority buy-in to what you're going to do is actually quite critical, because of the fact that it's going to affect everyone. You can't have just a focus group or a sample size, because then you get that wrong and then suddenly no one likes it. You actually need to get the majority. And I kind of love that thinking around it's how is it that you can create some kind of incentive or reward mechanism to get a really significant number of your users or customers to be able to give you feedback and actually get them to vote on what the options are and what it is that they would prefer. I think not only is that a really good way to de-risk what it is that you're going to be prioritizing in your development and where you're going to be putting your cash in terms of forking it out for your business, but that's also a really cool customer experience at the same time. And besides the incentive and the cash that I get out, it's I feel I was part of the decision-making process of what it is that I'm getting and what's here. And I imagine it just creates a bit more of this loyalty that people have towards where they're staying and being a tenant with you.
Absolutely. What's also important is for those listening who rent from an individual, your communication to your landlord is very limited to, have you paid your rent? Have you not? The geyser's leaking. our tenants are getting questions. How can we make your life better? What do we need to do as a business for you to be more comfortable, to be happier? It's so directly attributable to their positive experience. And I think just them getting that, thinking, well, my landlord actually cares. And it's not a common thing for landlords, to be seen as this, like someone who really like cares for their tenant. Don't get me wrong. We capitalists and we need to get a return, and we're generating profits in our business. But ultimately, there's a lot of decisions we've made in the past that have negatively affected our returns, but have made the tenants' lives a lot better. And well, maybe in the bigger picture, that creates a bigger business because tenants are happier, they stay for longer. But I want to give a small story. We did an enormous deal in COVID. We bought the ex-PwC head office, 30,000 square meter office building, depths of COVID, and we wanted to call it the Nelson. Why? Nelson Mandela is a great guy, and it's the biggest one we've done, and let's give the honor to Nelson Mandela. And we did it. One of our surveys that Greg spoke about, we sent to tenants a drop down of like 10 different choices or 12 different choices of names, and the Nelson came stone last, and the Apollo came first. And I thought that's a bit of a weird name, the Apollo, but the building was named the Apollo, and it's been the Apollo since. It's what the tenants want.
So guys, this is why I love doing this, because I actually get down into like the tactics that other people can run away with, and it gives me ideas about my own business around how I can improve and get customer feedback. But I really want to get back to the story so we can unpack other moments of gold like this. So we've got this place in Melrose, and I want to kind of speed up a little bit. And I know that you have this merger with Africrest. I think that's not something that's been explicitly said now, is that you didn't start off as Africrest, you merged as Africrest. I really want to get into that story, but before we conclude that, was there anything else meaningful in this point now that you think is worth like double clicking on before we move to the Africrest merger?
No, just in those early days, it was just really hard work. You don't have the capital to hire great staff. You don't have experience, so you're grinding a lot. You're asking tons of questions to hundreds of people. You on online forums, you're trying to read as much as you can.
When there's a flood, you're the ones rushing there to mop it up yourselves because you don't have staff necessarily there. When we've done it all, going on roofs of buildings and checking the waterproofing quotes, and it's a lot of hard work and getting your hands dirty, rolling up your sleeves and getting into it.
Yeah, that's the journey. Hey, is like you got to wear all the hats, you got to do all the things yourself. So actually, let's go on there. It was like, what point did you start addressing those issues? I mean, the fact that you're having to do everything yourselves, when was the point where you started dealing with that specific challenge and starting to kind of reduce this radical dependence the business has on you?
So the issue with a property company, a property holding company, especially a very small one, which we were, when we were funded by Buffett, we grew a portfolio of roughly 200-300 million rand of assets. It's minute in the property world, and you can't afford the staff you need to hire to manage this portfolio. So we were at a point where we're the small business. We were too hands-on on accounting and basically wearing all the hats, as you said. And then Nene was fired in 2015 in December. Finance minister was fired by Jacob Zuma. It sent the markets into free fall. And specifically the interest rate forward market blew out. And our funders at the time were, and probably most like the rest of the country, were quite skittish. At that stage, we were sitting on this Bramley property, the one on Melrose, which we were ready to develop. We had another site that we were looking to develop, and our partners at the time were just saying, guys, let's wait a bit and just see what happens with the markets. Which is probably a responsible thing for a private equity business to do, but for us, this was our whole world and our whole life. Fortunately, Greg's brother, Justin Blend, he's a couple of years older than us, and he had basically a mirror business, much bigger business with a gentleman, Nick Katsapis. They were growing Africrest, which was a office-only portfolio, and they were growing similar to us, wearing all the hats and trying to do everything they could. And we basically looked at each other. We said, guys, offices are not doing well. Residential's flying. Let's put things together. Let's put our assets together. We can now afford to hire better staff and stop wearing all the hats. Africrest had an incredible relationship with Future Growth, a pension fund manager, which gave incredible debt. And to this date, our sole debt funder, who we're very appreciative of. And there was such good synergies between the two businesses. The Resi guys, You had the guys with the debt now and a bit of, gray hairs and experience. I say gray hairs, Justin was only 34 when we did the merger. But, we put this business together in 2016. And I think we were very lucky that things turned out well, because you're basically putting 4 entrepreneurs all together with undefined roles and just throwing this together and saying, okay, guys, you now have a portfolio of, 800, 900 million rand of the assets. We're about to start 2 big developments that we've never developed before. Who's doing what here? And I think we were very lucky, the fact that we all started gravitating towards our own roles in the business and finding what we were good at, and that becoming our silo of the business. And I probably attest that to no ego. Greg could tell me, Grant, you're not X, that's why you can't do that. And instead of getting upset with it, I'd say, yeah, you're probably right, but maybe I can do this. And
I think at the time, the merger, it was a big decision for us. It wasn't.
It's a huge decision.
It was me and Grant, we became best friends. We had a lot of fun in the business. It was small. We did what we wanted. Justin's my brother. There's obviously the complications that come with that, with working with family. So it was a massive decision at the time, and we also loved our funding partners at the time, and we would have to leave them. But yeah, in the beginning it was rocky. We were on top of each other. We didn't know what each party was supposed to be doing, and different styles, and it was very rocky at the beginning. But as Grant said, as you find each person's niche in the business and what department and they're going to be in charge of, it just started running brilliantly.
When I'm hearing that story, there's the element of scaling always really comes down to people, right? I think that's the point of it, and you can't really scale without people. And one of the hardest things to do is be able to build out the management or leadership team in that phase. Because as the entrepreneur, that you've gone up on the roof, you've worn all the 7 different hats. To hire people for operational roles, you could do that essentially without blinking. You can spot the right talents and see if they can do the job quite quickly. But to build out that management team to really have trust with like significant business responsibilities is a serious challenge. And the fact that you almost did that the other way around by building in the merger, having synergies within the business, you've got this leadership capacity and leadership function that can deliver a lot more within the company, means that you've now got essentially support to yourselves as the founders of these businesses, where it's no longer just us and having to do all these things. We can actually put less on our own plates and do better with what's actually focused on our roles, which I think is a really good sign. And it's like I word it deliberately like that, because when people talk about it as like having less of the pie for the sake of a bigger pie, that's practically what it looks like, is because the fact that you're also focused on less work, on less scope, but in order to do it more effectively so that everyone can run a better company.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have a CEO. We make decisions, the 4 of us. We've never really had a vote on anything together, because when we have a decision to be made, we discuss it together. We hear different sides, and we all kind of agree because we all have the same goal in mind. So either convincing others that this is the way to do it, or others are convincing us. But again, no ego. Guys, what is the best thing for Africrest?
There's never been a deadlock at the business for a big decision, like should we do this deal or not. We've never had to get someone with a extra vote to break the deadlock. It's just never happened.
So on that, so like people they can be best of friends with their founders. They can have like ideal relationships with their investors. You can be like super clear, I think you're aligned, and you hit the certain challenging points in a business and suddenly misalignment is there. I think the fact that what you guys have gotten being able to make those decisions is like what do you do to be able to maintain that level of alignment and ensure that you're able to just make agreements as the 4 of you? How do you ensure that you sustain such consistent alignment as a leadership team? Let's pause here for a moment. If you've made it this far into the episode, it's probably because we're talking about things that you're trying to implement in your business. You found your sweet spot in the market, you've gained momentum, and you've already been through a phase of growth. Because of this, you know that on the outside, growth is super sexy. But on the inside, it's incredibly difficult to achieve and to sustain. So now I've got a question for you. Now that you know the sacrifices it takes to achieve growth, how much time are you currently spending thinking about your direction and your next phase of growth? I bet not as much as you'd like, because you're still in the thick of it. Leading, deciding, pushing for performance, pursuing new opportunities, maybe even thinking about selling the business. See, your story is yours. But this chapter where growth meets complexity, this is when things get hard. Because you can listen to insights from podcasts and stories from people that have been there before, but applying it to your context is a completely different ballgame. So let me help you. If you want to have a 90-minute, no strings attached conversation with me, then head over to Metavolve's website in the description of this podcast below, and let me help you navigate this next phase of growth. Because at the end of the day, building a great business is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
So this may not stay true forever, because at the moment we're all young and we've all wanted the same thing. And that's to build a great business in an honest and ethical way and create as much NAV for ourselves as possible while giving our tenants a great experience. And if that's your single line objective, well, when you have an argument, does your objective, does that match your objective? And why I say that might change is because maybe in 10 years time or 5 years time, one partner maybe wants to take dividends out the business and another partner doesn't. We've merged with Africrest almost 10 years ago. We've never taken a dividend out the business. Why? Because we believe as partners, as shareholders, that the most important thing for the growth of this business is to leave every rand on the table, because of our goal to create this great business in an honest and ethical way, to the benefit of our tenants and creating a large balance sheet. And that may change in the future, but that single goal has kept us very aligned. It's not 20 goals that we need to try and match. It's one thing. And as long as it aligns with that one thing, it's been quite simple to agree on.
Amazing. Even to go one level deeper, how is it that you were able to come up with what that first, with that one goal and objective is in the first place?
Sure to remember, Grant. I think it's just...
I can. It is, yeah. We never sat down one day and said, all right, guys, let's sit for 2 hours and do a strategy session. That goal was always there in our hearts, and it's been there from the very beginning. And that basically every time we were arguing about something, we'd say, well, is that the best way to do it? Well, should we do that because it's locking up capital? Or should we do this? Is our balance sheet going to grow? Or is this the right thing for the tenants? And basically it resulted in, we learned that phrase, we learned that sentence just because that was the end of all our arguments. Well, does it, go back to that point? So it was always there. We just had to find it. It took us a while to find it. It was never, and I think most businesses, if you look at, and I'm not saying we have a great business, but if you look at great business out there, they don't sit and say, all right, I want to do X. They're doing something because of X. And then later on in the journey, the X, reveals itself. You're like, oh, well, that's what we've been working towards. That's it.
Yeah. So I thank you for that, because I wanted to unpack that. And that's exactly what we do with our clients. I mean, this is where the org site comes in. And when a lot of the clients that work with us are usually in the stage where they've grown the business, they've like multiple options in front of them, how they want to grow further. There's this chaos in scaling. And it's kind of just this point of almost like, what are we and where are we going in the first place? Because they've said yes to all these opportunities and the business has gotten quite complex. And the way that I tap into that is not just like, it's not a vision board, right? It's like, oh, where did you want to go, etc. I actually put them into a meditative process because you already know. You just have kind of forgotten. And so by doing that and unpacking that and giving them loads of guiding questions, taking notes, integrating that into the story of, this is the purpose, what the business does, why we exist. This is our current mission, what we're trying to achieve. More often than not, it's about the fact that, we want to build this business to a great sustainable one that's best in class in this industry. And our vision is, that's always going to be unique to the company. But like that's the core of why we're doing it. And this motivation that kicks back in and this alignment like re-energizes in this leadership team because that's it. And then the goals are just like, how do we make sure that we're going to be achieving that? But to your point is it's always there. And the reason why I wanted to focus on like how you maintain the alignment, because I had an assumption that was the point, is you had a clear mission in mind. But this is the value of having a clear mission, is when you lose that, you can that's when you can get overwhelmed. You can get like stuck in the weeds and in the chaos and the complexity. You can make different decisions as the shareholders of the business and where you're going. But just to be able to lift up and say, like, because the visual metaphor I give is that you're always swimming. Imagine you're swimming to Atlantis, but right now Atlantis is just covered in fog. So every time you look up with your head, you have no idea if you're going in the right direction. You have no idea how far it is. But by removing that fog and clarifying that's actually what you're looking at, you can keep swimming, look up and be like, we're getting closer, we're on track, I can see what that looks like, and then you put your head down and you keep swimming?
I think people underestimate the getting into partnership with someone. Often it's like, oh, you want to do this? I'm also looking at doing this. Let's start a business. But partnership can be the best thing in the world and the worst thing in the world. It's so similar to a marriage, if not sometimes more difficult to get out of than a marriage. And we've had terrible dealings with partners in the past. We had a whole thing called the tenant partnership model in the office portfolio, where we would partner with businesses to give them a free share in the building that they occupied for signing a lease. We did a bunch of those, and it helped us grow. But on the whole, they didn't necessarily work out positively, because the only thing binding us together was they needed a building, and they thought that they can get free shares in a building instead of just paying a normal landlord and not getting shares in the building. It was the same rental. They didn't have to do anything different. It was a great deal for them. But long term, we didn't have the same values. We weren't going in the same direction. So it didn't always end up well. Mostly didn't. Luckily, we never lost any money from it, and it helped us grow. But choosing your partners and making sure those values align is probably the single most important thing I think a business person can do.
Cool. I'm also now going to utilize that and completely detour to focus down that road that you just unlocked. But talking about this tenant partnership model, I mean, this is an example of when you have an idea as an entrepreneur. I think this is a great thing that's going to unlock growth for the company. Let's sell this on to our clients. They're going to do it, and you're like, actually, that was not a great idea, right? So just talk to me through that process around like what made you think of that idea in the first place, and like what was the decision making that went into launching that tenant partnership model?
So essentially, it was quite genius and very simple at the same time. In Joburg, as I was explaining earlier, the disparity between an empty building and a full building's value was massive. It could be double to triple the value if there was a good tenant in there with a long-term lease compared to it being empty. So we said, cool guys, don't go sign a lease with so-and-so landlord. We will buy you the perfect building that you want. Sign a lease with us. We're going to pay half or a third of the value. And as soon as we bought the building, we've got you as a tenant, the building's going to be worth double to triple. So we're happy to give you a percentage of the building for free, because you are knocking the deal for us. We're getting the value uptick, and you can pay the same rental as you would have paid anyone else. So it's a no-brainer sale. Everyone thought there was a catch. That was the hardest thing for us to get the message across. We had countless meetings. It was too good to be true, it sounded, but it was that simple.
Yeah, it's the simplicity of it is the fact that in order for me to win from this deal, I need you in there, right? Without you in there, I can't win from this deal. So it's like, do you want to just tag along and then we'll share this win-win? And then people are like, no one gives away free stuff in business, especially free business, exactly. Literally. I don't get it. But then it did work, and you did manage to convince them. So like, it's a great idea on paper, great idea when you eventually convince people. Why did this go wrong?
2 reasons. Greg mentioned earlier the value systems of our new partners was off. And the second reason is businesses are transitory. And what I mean by that is businesses get bigger and smaller. They get bought out and they get sold. And what do you do now when you've done a deal with a company who takes a 5,000 square meter lease, and the owner of the business you've done the deal with, and he owns the building, and then he sells his business to an Indian conglomerate. And all of a sudden, you now have a partner in the building who sold his company, and now this tenant is just looking at you saying, I don't want to be in this building. And I think it was the transitory nature of businesses that caused most of our chaos. Some businesses closed down. Now all of a sudden the business is closed down, but you've got a partner who owns the building still. And I think it'll probably work on a much larger scale. And I think it has worked. If you look at this, like Sasol's head office in Sandton was a partnership between the Sasol pension fund and the developer, and maybe much larger businesses that are a bit more stable. But because we were a small, property player, we were buying businesses that were very transitory. They were either going to outgrow, get smaller. It's unlikely they were going to actually be found for that property for the next 10, 15 years, or they're going to be sold. We had a building that was sold to a listed fund, and the listed fund like, we don't want to be here. We don't have a share in the building. And now you can't give them a share in the building and the old owner has a share in the building before everyone has a share in the building.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? It's like it's almost obvious but unthought of and unsaid is that if you're going into partnership with someone, and I think that's that maybe if I'm reading between the lines here, is you didn't necessarily acknowledge the partnership point. You were like, this is a cool product, like this is a cool deal to be able to sell. But the partnership point is like, can I like get into partnership with you for the long term? And can I ensure that you will not necessarily be stable, but be consistent amongst that time? Right. And it's like, if you're going to be consistent, then this can work. And that's the point, is when there's inconsistency, that's when partnerships fall apart. So I think you spoke to that. You mentioned the fact that values weren't aligned. I would just want to know practically, what did that kind of look like in real life?
It could be as simple as the dividend policy. Well, we have a dividend. We're young, we're ambitious, and we want to reinvest every rand into our business and grow. And maybe the partner was 65 and he just wants to get a dividend check every month. That's a huge value misalignment. Each of you are right in your own right in your own stage of life. Neither is wrong, but together it's very wrong. And that's a very simple one. Some partners want to reduce debt in the business. We service interest only because we'd rather reinvest our capital. Both are right. Neither party is wrong, but it's completely misaligned.
I get you. And I think that's the other side of it, is where it makes me immediately think of like shareholders in an MOI. Is that like, the business is great, we're partners, the deal makes sense, we know we can work together, we can make this happen. But then you get like, once that excitement's fallen down, actually comes down to the fact that it's like, well, what are we actually doing with our shares now? Instead of what are we doing with the business, and what are we doing as shareholders? It's being able to, I can imagine what that was for you, is one of those solid lessons of, there's a big difference between our shareholder hat, our director hat, and like our job hats that we need to wear. And often, like, I think as entrepreneurs, is what can be really difficult for us, is we don't realize where the boundary and the difference sits between them, and the implications of our decisions that can have on each of those roles.
Absolutely. If you're dating someone, you're usually in your best behavior. You don't tell them your things that are wrong with you. And the same in business. You're going into partnership with people. You're trying to put on the best face and the best version of yourself. I think you need to try to find the worst version of each other and see if you're happy with that person. And alignment. You need to say, well, I'll go back to the marriage story. Do you want to have kids or not? Do we want to pay dividends or not? Are we looking to build a business for 5 years and flip it? Are we looking to be in business for 20 years and grow something? You have to have those very tough decisions in the beginning and make sure that alignment's there. People are usually too excited, and we're partners now. But Greg and I were very lucky, and when we did the merger with Africrest, and I say lucky because we didn't plan it that way. We were aligned. We were lucky that we were aligned.
Yeah, and that's great, guys. I mean, it's like it's what I attest to being partners with Brett and Nick as well, is that there's a certain value alignment that we have, and we're such a clear picture in terms of helping entrepreneurs build great sustainable businesses. Like, that's the whole point of like why we're doing this at the end of the day. And yes, we'll have solid conflict and clear, strong disagreements and arguments, but it's about the how. It's not about the who. It's not about the what or where we're trying to get down to. It's the fact that we've got different perspectives and we're able to essentially come out the other end. But there's never a question of why are you in this, or why are we having this debate in the first place, which is I think is a great thing to have, and it sets up anyone for success. Because I haven't had the comparison, but I imagine not having that would just make life a lot harder than it needs to be. So guys, you've now, thank you again for another deep dive. We've merged with Africrest now, and you've got a strong aligned leadership team. I mean, you've now blended the synergies of the businesses. You've got debt that you can now start to tap into. So the capital for the business, in a business that's extremely capital intensive. So there's a lot here that's this recipe for scale that you're unlocking. I mean, like you also said that you came from the residential side and knew that was working in terms of being able to take in these value-adding investments. They came from the commercial side, and there was naturally a market downturn. So you kind of blended both of these worlds. So talk to me, what was that like? What was that idea? Because it sounds amazing and genius for me, but just I'm just imagining it's also practically maybe a bit complicated to execute. And so you would take these commercial properties and essentially flip them into residential ones and change them. So was that the idea that you had when you merged the business? Like, guys, this is going to run, or did that kind of come later?
It wasn't something we intended on doing. The stars were all aligned. We had the commercial knowledge from the Africrest side of the business. We had the residential knowledge from Grant and my side of the business. We had the funding. but it wasn't something we intended on doing. It actually happened organically to the whole converting offices into apartments. So Grant and I bought a building into the portfolio, which was occupied by a school in Ferndale. The school outgrew it, and we did a settlement with them, and we were sitting with a small empty office building, which we knew at the time we're probably not going to fill up. It was just there was too much vacancy in the area, and we thought, what can we do with this thing? And we said, okay, well, let's convert it to apartments. And we did it was a small conversion at the time of 36 apartments. Up until that date, Grant and I hadn't really developed. We had bought buildings and renovated, existing blocks of flats, but we hadn't developed something new. There were existing tenants there. We gutted the building. We put in 36 beautiful apartments, and we listed it on Property 24. We didn't really have the systems in place to deal with the ramp up of a new building. And we let one of our accounts ladies answer the phone. And a couple hours after listing, we went to her and we said, Doris, how's it going? Have you got any phone calls yet? Now, you remember we used to...
Was her name actually Doris?
Yes, she's still with us.
I love that.
Doris is still here.
We used to, the phone's not ringing too much from the commercial side, which was now the bigger part of the business at the time. Struggling to get tenants, and she said, "Yeah, no, it's been busy. I've had, and I didn't hear the number. I said, Doris, 5 calls. She said, no, 50 calls. I said 50. She said, yeah. I was like, and from that moment, the ball just dropped, and we're onto something here. Because the phone does not ring that much in the property market in Johannesburg. And we were completely ill-prepared. We didn't have anyone to do viewings of the apartments. Our project manager was running like crazy, trying to finish this thing off and show the apartments off. And we just went into the hardcore work mode of hiring and getting systems in place. And that was a huge success. We ended up buying the property next door. It's converting 166 apartments. So that was really the catalyst getting into the whole residential conversion space.
So what's important there is if you can put yourself in our minds in 2018 when we did the deal. So our office buildings aren't doing great. 2016. So the office buildings aren't doing great. We're always trying to renew tenants. We're trying to do this tenant participation model on the commercial buildings. And then all of a sudden you got this small little building that's just exploded. And I think at that point we went from being not random, but just investors of buying some buildings and value adding to maybe there's a business here. And we all just almost cleared our heads and be like, all right. And as Greg said, we bought the building next door, 168 apartments. And in a very short time, over 2 years, we developed 1,400 apartments.
Sure.
And we went from 200 apartments to 1,400 in a very short period in 2.5 years. And early on, we spoke about how it was difficult to start. This was the next ramp up for us, and this was all. Now we need systems. Now we need operating standard procedures, and we need manuals, and we need staff, and we need who's answering the phone, and if they're not there, who's going to answer the phone? And that was for me probably one of the most exciting times in the business, because we at one stage we had 6 development sites on the go at once. 6.
Sure.
It was crazy to be developing that much. And continuously, making mistakes, and then, okay, wait a minute, guys, we can't do that. And then every site needs to change and do something a bit different. But it was very exciting to build that first wave of apartments.
Yeah, and now obviously, guys, now this is what I really want to get into, and this is the meat of it. But now the how part, it explains so much of the story around being able to unlock what that growth was. And the reason why I love to go into the depth is because, in hindsight, if you look at the business now, it's so clear. Why have someone not thought about this before, been able to unlock it, be able to undo it? But there was so much that went into getting you to the point of doing that even if you'd had the idea earlier, I think your ability to execute on it wouldn't have been ready. So it really was just the perfect storm of preparation meets opportunity. That's the success equation. So now you're rapidly growing. I mean, you said you 1,600 units in just 2 years, and this is now leading up to COVID. So talk to me now about how is it that you managed to scale that so quickly? I mean, you've got 6 property developments on the go at the same time. obviously the point there is like there's at this point a lot of the decisions, I'm assuming, are made via phone calls and like meetings, and like let's have a chat, let's make it happen, sign some documents, guys, how are things done? It's like there's all this knowledge that's baked into your heads around how this business is executing, and you had to fundamentally change in this phase. So what were the challenges that you faced in this part of the journey?
So leading up into COVID, we were quite fortunate that we had just completed a large wave of our developments. I call it the first wave, our first 1,600 odd developed units. We had finished them all leading into COVID. And what we were doing, we were ramping up now for our second wave of large developments. And we were negotiating on 2 buildings in Sunninghill. We had identified Sunninghill as an area. We had a building in Sunninghill, an office building. We saw how tough the area was in terms of office rentals, but we thought there's a lot of offices in Sunninghill. Let's convert them to apartments. We bought a building, a 12,000 square meter office building. We started a conversion into 240 apartments, and we were probably 70% through the construction of these apartments. A little bit worried the whole time because all of our developments previously had been in established nodes with similar type of apartments. We thought ours were better and a more affordable rental, but Sunninghill, there was no comparative in our market.
I think sorry, Grant, just to jump in there, I think what's important to understand with our business compared to a regular developer will buy a piece of land or usually get an option on a piece of land, take it to market, do pre-sales, sell off plan, they've got 70, 80% already locked in the bank, and then they'll start building. They know it's a successful development. With us, we got to buy an office building up front or a piece of land. We got to build the whole thing. And then a month before we're ready to have people move in, we start advertising to see that were our rentals correct? Are people interested in living in this area? We don't know until we spend every cent, pretty much.
So it's a lot of risk.
It's going to be a success. And that's a huge barrier to entry as well.
Yeah, so we bought this office building. We were pretty convinced it would be a good residential node, but we weren't sure. It wasn't proven. And we were 80% through the construction, or 85%. COVID hits, construction stops. We were fortunate that our tenants were very resilient through COVID. We did a lot of programs to try to help them through, being stuck in apartments. We gave foster internet lines, and we try to make their experience a bit better. It's tough in lockdown at a small apartment. But at the time, there were 2 other buildings we were trying to buy in Sunninghill. The PwC head office, which I spoke about earlier, to convert to almost 700 units, and a building down the road to convert to about 350 units. And because of COVID, everyone was worried about the next day, the next month. Will the country still be here? Will anything still be here? And we had a decision to make. Those 2 assets became very, very affordable for us. The sellers who had previously wanted X, they dropped their price and they wanted to get them off their books. And we sat there and we said, well, guys, here's an opportunity to buy another basically 1,000 apartments worth of office buildings. But the problem is we don't know if the area is going to work, because the one that's almost there, we're not going to be able to finish that and release that until COVID's done.
Yeah, you can't validate it.
Can't validate it. And the truth is, if we wait to validate it, someone else is going to buy these buildings.
The opportunity's gone, yeah.
Opportunity's gone. So at the time, it was probably the biggest inflection point for Africrest, because we bought those other 2 buildings unconditionally. Again, did we have the money? No. When we made a 70 odd million rand unconditional offer to attack for the PwC building, we never had the debt lined up. We never had the cash lined up. We knew it was a good deal. We knew the funding would come. But it was an inflection point, because if we bought those 2 buildings for roughly 110 million rand, that's what the 2 other ones cost us. Now we had the first building, which is probably 140 million rand in the ground there. And COVID lockdowns in April, May eased up. We finished the development. And in June 2020, we launched. When we launched that first development in June 2020, we already bought those other 2 assets. If we launched that development and there were crickets, I don't think the business would have lasted another year. We would have probably lost between 50 and 100 million rand, and confidence knocked, et cetera, a different story. But we launched that Alpha, which is the first building in Sunninghill, and they flew. And we were very fortunate. We filled those 230 units up in about 7 months. And we went to then convert those other 2 and third buildings in a period of a year. And today we sit with about 1,400 units in Sunninghill, with another 600 in development.
I think, Cameron, what's important there with the decision making was, what we kept saying is the fundamentals are there for the area. At that price point, at that location, with that beautiful look of the office buildings we're converting, the recipe was there. Even though we hadn't proven anything, we just believed in the fundamentals that it would work.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a couple 100 million rand worth of belief sitting over there. But that makes me want to really understand, guys, like, what was that like emotionally? Because I mean, there's the like going out there, making that decision. I can imagine the stress and anxiety because you're dealing with like serious scale of uncertainty here. So what was that like before those apartments flew? Because I can imagine the joy after that must have been one of the greatest moments in your guys' lives.
So I wasn't uncertain at all. I'm pretty, I was certain that it would work. So when this unit started filling up, I was like, I really expected it.
Okay, sure. I wish everyone had the crystal ball you have, but that's epic. Greg, what was it like for you?
I believe that we would fill up the first one. As I said, I believed in the fundamentals. During the one across the road, the Apollo of almost 700 apartments, especially me running the management and the marketing side of everything, that scared me a lot because the scale was just unbelievable to be signing that many leases each month during ramp up and then to manage the thing. I wasn't sure if that many people on top of the original 200 in such a short space of time wanted to come to the area. And it's not a typical area that people in that rental bracket, that 6,000 rand rental bracket, are looking to rent in, because historically it's not affordable to them. So from that aspect, I was very nervous. I just thought it would take a very long time to fill the building. But my God, we set records. So, I mean, 1 month we signed over 100 leases in a month. It's on average,
sure,
it's over 3 leases a day. We're pumping. But it just took the business to the next level in terms of like systems and management's ability to cope with such a large amount of admin. If you think about signing a lease for one apartment, how much back and forth over emails, phone calls, in person, documents checking, all of that going into one lease. And now you've got this team sitting there and they got to do 100 of these. And for, every lease you sign, you've got 10 people coming to view who aren't applying, and you've got maybe 5 of them applying, and then you've got back and forth trying to get hold of their references. So it was a lot of work, but it was such a great success.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But like, what you're going through that phase now, it's not just scaling, it's not just change. Like the full evolution of the business actually had to happen to be able to handle those kinds of volumes, and like you said, that much admin. So again, we've spoken practically, but we've spoken about people and systems. I want to speak practically about doing it. Is how did you go about building in the systems and getting the people that you needed to in order to be able to deliver on this sudden scale? Like, what went wrong? What broke? What went right? I know this is a deep, high helicopter level topic, but I want to hear all the stories here, guys.
So there's a lot of trial and error, I think. I think what's nice about working for a company like Africrest is we make decisions quickly, we try things quickly, and we move on from them quickly. So we don't have to check with board or investors. Can we try to reduce deposit next month, or offer COVID lockdown's about to hit, let's fill up as many people as we can. Let's give them 3 months free. That we can decide that in 10 minutes and implement it. So I think the trial and error has been great. This first few years were tough. I think we were understaffed, and I was super involved, in every little thing, and so stressful. Eventually getting us to this point, and we're still evolving and improving through trial and error. But it's about cutting out those failures fast.
So and I love that, because I mean, this is the almost the table stakes to be an entrepreneur, and we all resonate with that. But what I want to understand is the internal environment, because we're just talking about is decisions about the business and like what to do and what to experiment. But now it's like there's management layers, there's new roles in place that never existed before. There's new systems that were never there before. How did you go about that journey and that internal change and like essentially maturation of your company?
I think, Greg, if I can answer, our tenant in the beginning stages, we were so hands-on as the shareholders in terms of development walks, being on site with staff, and I think they started to all see the way we were behaving, that we cared about one thing, and that was our tenants' experience. And why is this light skew? The tenants are going to think it looks funny. Why do our security guards have very small name tags? You can't see them. It's not a nice environment. Make it bigger, and then you can greet John and say, "Hi, John, how are you?" the tenants don't feel awkward there. Where our tenants get groceries stored if they're out at work and there's a checkers 60 delivery. So your staff see that and they start to believe it and they start to imitate you and say, well, they care about the tenants. And when you're not there, hopefully they're repeating it as well. But I think it was a lot of being very, very present, very, very hands on the ground. With our leasing agents, walking with the leasing agents and seeing how they sold the apartment. I've maybe not as much the last year or two, but I used to be at a lot of properties where there was leasing tours going on, and I'll take over the leasing tour. And the leasing agent, a very junior member of our team, would see me now with 4 potential tenants, and I was like explaining to them why they should live here, and the swimming pool's this, and uncapped internet, and flexibility, and basement parking, and the lift, and the heat pump, and we were really hands on. We never sat in an ivory tower head office and said leasing agents go rent out apartments. Our staff know that. I don't think they see us as the owners of the business. I really don't think so. I think they just see us as senior management.
We also went with quite a unique way of managing the properties. Most property management companies have a big head office. They have a call center where tenants phone into, and they'll log a ticket and send someone out. They may have like a caretaker living on site or something. We have an office at each of our estates with 3 or 4 administrators, a property manager, an operations manager, and a caretaker, a handyman team. Basically, it can be 5 or 6 guys purely dedicated just to that property. They don't work anywhere else. All of them know that property. They know what goes wrong with it. They know what goes right. They get to learn the tenants. They get to know them personally. They get to know what's important to them. And we can really offer that service. So we're essentially running lots of small businesses instead of this giant machine at head office that, with one cog falling at head office, the whole thing falls flat. So whilst it's difficult because you're not on top of them all day, like seeing the machine running, and it's decentralized, we think it's worked better for us, at least up until now. Having these guys take ownership of their small business, well, they're actually by revenue quite large businesses, each one of them. And that's essentially how we scaled it. Open up a business, open up a business, open up a business.
This decentralized model also stemmed from the fact that we hate call centers. And we thought to our tenants, it must be the worst thing when you're at home and you have to phone a call center. It's so removed. And we thought, well, hotels don't have call centers, because if you're at a hotel and something works, you phone downstairs. And we thought, well, maybe we need to run our properties more like hotels. We never copied competitors. We're always very aware what competitors are doing. If it's a great idea, we're happy to latch onto that. But we didn't do the norm, like Greg said, centralize the head office and have small presence inside. We said, well, we need to be a hotel for our tenants. We're not going to get more revenue from them, but it was the right thing for our tenant, and then it actually became the right thing for the business.
It's funny because our tenants actually treat us as though we are a hotel reception. They phone us demanding something now as though, it's like they paid a fortune for the night and that's the experience.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I'm paying 5,000 rand a month for this apartment, and you guys have taken a day to come fix my broken light. I'm like, sure, I'll pay a lot more than that where I live, and my landlord's ignored me for the last 3 weeks. They're not even getting back to me. Never mind, sent the guy to come fix it.
You get what you wish for. Hey, you want to give them that hotel resort experience. They're going to start behaving like it at the same time. And I love the way that you've also spoken about this because, look, Metavolve, since our existence, has always been in the scaling space, right? Really helping through the scaling journey because it's very complex. And where a lot of our clients, when we would trigger this point of going on a journey, is usually they're like, okay, I really need to get a COO, or I need to get a commercial manager, or I need to get someone like an ops manager or someone to do this. And I'm always so skeptical because it's like, guys, the way that you're building out this business in terms of starting to decentralize the structure, you're doing it for yourself because you're overwhelmed and you're trying to reduce some stuff on your plate and you're hoping someone can replace you. And that's always going to go wrong. But what you guys did, and this is why we went through the process that we went to, it's also the same thing with our strategy approach now, because we start with the market, the customers, the customer experience that you want. Because naturally what you baked in is, this is the customer experience that we want people to be able to deliver. You show up and you role model what it looks like to give that customer experience. So whenever you're hiring the people that are in management or the people that you're trusting on the ground, they're not approaching this from the fact that this is my job. Obviously, it is, but they've seen this very sincere passion from you delivering this, so that when you hold them to the same expectation, it's because I'm holding myself to the same expectation. Like, this is the way, this is naturally what I'm delivering on, and because it's so sincere, and it's about the fact that you're showing care about giving other people a good experience. That's very infectious onto other people, and I think I love that, because I also want to share with the audience that, for me, when it comes down to successful scaling, focusing on the scaling comes from the bottom up. We're taking care of the customer experience first, making sure that that's them. The people that we have and the systems that we have are to ensure that that customer experience is being taken care of. And if those things aren't, then I'm getting involved. I'm getting back deep in operations. I'm taking care of that customer experience, and we're going to rebuild this thing together until I can step away. And because then I know that the customers are happy.
Yeah, I agree with you. We also make micro changes all the time, and I don't know where this applies to the general scale. But if something's a little bit wrong, we change it then and there. We on WhatsApp groups for the teams. We all we don't just let like small little things. The minute it creeps up, does that look a bit wrong? When you walk into the apartment, is that cupboard a little bit too close to your head? We don't just leave it and we'll deal with it later. At that moment, a long conversation about it, and we fix it. And we always making these minute changes. Like we report annually to our funder, to Future Growth, and they always say, "What did you learn this year?" We're like, "Guys, we didn't learn one big thing. We learned a million little things, just little adjustments to the business." And that really, like, we're very conscious of those small adjustments. That okay, that was wrong. Let's change that a little bit.
So, guys, thank you so much for sharing the story. I think, like, the fact that we can get deep into the customer experience here, the fact that you're talking about the scaling, you've decentralized the business in a sense that there's a certain amount of autonomy and control within each site around how this is managed. You've got the right people faced there. You've built this culture of dealing with it now. That's at every single level of the business, and that's how we're going to solve these problems. What I want to know is just any other mistakes that you learned in this process of scaling, or any kind of experience that you have with our audience that are scaling as well, that you learned from this, rapid expansion stage of your business.
For me, a big learning was hire people for the future. Don't just hire when you need and panic and say, I need someone now. Rather pay that salary for the extra few months, let them learn, let them train, even if you don't need them yet. We're at the point now where we just, with junior administrators and that sort of thing, we just hire them. We'll put them somewhere and there'll be a need for them. But I think we got caught with our pants down a few times where, a key person leaves and, oh my God, what are we going to do? Having that backup in place, and then we make all our staff members do a manual for everything that they do. How do I do this?
Okay,
essentially
amazing. Cool.
If they got hit by a bus and someone had to take over their job, they could look up anything they do in their manual with screenshots, with explanations. So we're trying to take out that internal IP from all the staff that we lose. So, when that staff member inevitably will move on one day, and put it into paper. And we're quite religious about them, keeping them up to date.
So that's a really good and useful one. When did you start putting that in place? Because I imagine that, because I'm thinking about me and the scale for my business now, I was like, that would be super helpful. But I don't think like the best allocation of people's time, because we're still in the early days, unlocking our own growth and taking it from there. When was it that you realized and thought that it was like, okay, having manuals for everyone's job is going to be something super useful to do?
I think it was when we couldn't step in to do it ourselves anymore. We realized that, we actually, and when we didn't have the time to personally train each person that came on board. So it was, when did we start at Grant? Probably 6 years ago, maybe. And the manual started out quite simple, because you may not have all your systems up in the beginning and they may change completely. But they evolve with time and they get thicker and thicker. And it's such a blessing for a new staff member coming in to not have to think, oh, I wish I could phone the previous person who did my job and ask them how they did this, and they can just look it up.
100%. Grant, from your side, any experience shares or unpleasant learnings that you got?
I think lots of mistakes I made along the way. Like I made tons of mistakes, but I was very quick that when it was pointed out, I didn't try cover it up. I didn't try, protect my own bullshit. I was like, okay, that was the wrong way to develop that. That was the wrong place to put the window. How do we fix it moving forward? And I was very lucky. I got into a phase of when people used to complain, I used to get quite, it is now, okay, let's use that to make the business better. There's always that, okay, we still got thousands of apartments to develop. So at least I learned that now, so the rest are going to be better. But in the beginning, I used to be quite emotional, and I think it's probably a bit of ego there, like defending your decision. And then I just learned that I don't have all the answers, and my partners have the answers, and together we have all the answers. So when I'm unsure, I just ask them, we debate it, we argue, and we move forward. But I think that's critical, because otherwise you're not working towards growing the business, you're working towards defending your ego.
Yeah, that's actually a big difference that a lot of people don't realize that it's happening until kind of the ego calms down afterwards. And you're like, I didn't show up as my best there, but it's in the moment it happens. And I think only through, I guess, well, look, I mean, you can accelerate that through self-reflection, proper self-development work. But the other side of it is it kind of just takes time. And this is how we develop as leaders and how we improve. And as long as we're reflecting on that and thinking about how we can be better, not just in terms of making the business better, but how we can improve as people, I think we'll always get there. So guys, thank you very much for sharing the story. I think there's been such lovely nuggets of practical wisdom that you've shared with us. I just want to know, what does the next 6 to 18 months look like?
So we're very fortunate that this machine that we've been building over the last 5-6 years we've shared with you is revving up. We got about 5,000 apartments in development at the moment. 3,500 we've started, 1,500 will be starting in the next couple of months. And it's very exciting that we've been able to capitalize off all our learnings and make it and take it to this next level. So the portfolio will be roughly 8,000-9,000 apartments by 2026-7. We'll be a significant landlord in Johannesburg, which we actually don't care about. The one thing earlier I wanted to mention was we've never wanted to be big. We've never done deals to grow for the size of scale. We've never, we want to be great. And between 2018 and 2020, we didn't do any deals. And we didn't beat ourselves up about it because we had no growth targets. We had no board to report back to. And, well, why haven't you guys grown your revenue? Or, every deal we've done has been a great deal. And we've wanted to do that deal. And if the deal metrics don't work out, 1 or 2 now are marginal. We just don't do them. We don't need to. And I think we're lucky that we've got a lot of great projects on the go. I'm hoping that with, the positive sentiment in the market with, governmental change, means that these assets maybe can grow at an inflationary rate, but at the same time, that actually negatively affects our business, because the better South Africa does and the economy does, well, office vacancies are going to drop, and maybe office owners aren't going to be selling their buildings to us at a deep discount for us to convert, and this whole conversion ride may be over, which means that we'll need to adjust, like we did 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and we'll have to use our skills and adjust to do something a bit different. But at the moment, we're lucky. We're able to ride this wave, and we're spending 75 million rand a month on construction at the moment. In November, we'll have 2,500 builders across 7 different sites. So it's a cool phase to be in. We're very, very fortunate.
Nice. And well, look, when that moment comes when the economy does change, because look, it's trending in the positive direction. But when you get to that moment of having to rethink the business and your strategy, I hope Metavolve comes to mind. But guys, I'm gonna let the conversation go there. The final question that I have for every episode is, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
So I'd imagine the one question which we get asked a lot is, your skill set could have been easily duplicated or replicated in a Sydney or Los Angeles or London, and why don't you just do it there? Because apartments and apartments. If you're doing 100 apartments in Johannesburg, you can do 3 in London and probably make the same money. And I think looking back at our story and our trajectory, I think we were very fortunate to be in Johannesburg during this office, decline in value, and be able to be opportunistic to take on these assets. And I think, to a lot of your listeners out there, maybe this is, something they can use for themselves, is that we didn't have a ton of competition because people were really negative about Johannesburg property, as most people are. But at the end of the day, Johannesburg has 4 million households. There's a lot of people that live in Johannesburg. It's a big economy. And yes, you can be negative towards the outlook of an asset class, but that doesn't mean you can't get stuck into that asset class and make a lot of money in it. And I think, we're not at growth point where we own the largest office landlord in the country, which is very, linked to the economy, like a Checkers or a Pick and Pay or whatever it is. When you're a small player, you could be in a market that's not doing well, but you can really outperform others because, just because you're entrepreneurial and you have that ability.
Well, cool, guys. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a joy to get your story. And I can't wait just to see how the rest of the growth unfolds, because it's an epic story to share. I think the approach that you have towards building your business, the passion that you clearly have, and the ethos that you build into your company is these are recipes for success. And I hope other people listening to this can learn to take some of those ingredients and apply them to their own context. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and yeah, guys, all the best for the future.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you, Cameron.
Have you found yourself also struggling with scaling issues regarding people and systems like Grant and Greg spoke about in this podcast? Well, that's the reason why many of our clients choose Metavolve. Our strategy development program is deliberately built for entrepreneurs like you who want to take the chaos out of scaling their business. We've taken many of our clients from plateauing for a few years and struggling with these scaling issues to, within 6 months, growing revenue by over 20%, net profit by 63%, and actually being able to take a holiday and switch off for the first time whilst their business keeps growing. My team and I will take you through a structured process to help you not only overcome your scaling issues, but also create a holistic strategy tailored for your business. A strategy that's easier for your team to understand, talk about, and execute. By the end of it, you and your team will have a clear roadmap to grow faster and more sustainably. We're so confident in the value we provide that if after 3 sessions you don't see the impact, you'll get all your money back. Are you ready to grow your business more sustainably? Visit metavolve.co to book a 30-minute introductory call with me to see how we can help you take the chaos out of scaling. And before you go, remember to like, comment, share this podcast with your network so other people like you can receive incredibly valuable stories from entrepreneurs like Grant and Greg. So until next time, cheers for now.